I was born in East LA, and June 1927, one of 8 children. Mom and Dad came from towns in Zacatecas, very close to each other, as they would say, una jornada, a day's walk, about 15 miles. Yet they met here in California. They lived in Los Angeles all the time, and Dad was an interesting character. He was very well read. We grew up with a lot of books in the house, and I would look through the ones that had pictures. And he was a barber. That was his vocation. And for a long time, he had his own barbershop. The Depression wrecked the family. Dad lost the barbershop and went on relief working, digging ditches with the hands of a barber and of a skilled craftsman. The Depression brought about this relocation program. And in the Southwest, Mexicans, as we were called, we weren't called Mexican Americans, was the group that society wanted to get rid of for practical reasons. And we stayed, completely ruined now. And that's when we moved to South LA for a while. So we were Depression children, and we knew we were Mexican. And we grew up in East LA among Jews and Italians, Poles, and Japanese. And so all of the Nava kids were inoculated against prejudice because we grew up in the United Nations. And so I think it's interesting for the Mexican American generation that went into the armed forces after Pearl Harbor, that this was our country. That generation flooded into the war. And in our barrio, boys were practically tripping over themselves to volunteer. Que pendejos, what dumbbells. It's an example of Mexican pride and aggressiveness. I realized it even then, to show I'm American. All the able-bodied Mexican boys went into the service. And we were proud as a group, volunteering. I volunteered just as soon as I was legally able, 17, to go into the Navy. And they checked my birth certificate. I think I was 17 and 3 weeks. Everybody went in. There were just no young guys in the barrio. And before long, you saw gold stars on the windows. A lot of gold stars. And so you know that someone in that family was killed in the war. It was, for me at least, an experience that shaped me. Because for the first time, among Italians, Poles, Swedes, Irish, and Jews from other parts of the country, and Anglos, I realized when no one could teach me that I could do anything they could do. And that's the kind of lesson life teaches you. I could do anything they could do. Matter of fact, since we're here in the Edward Roybal Foundation, the two knew each other in high school and were very good friends. Ed encouraged Henry to study X-ray technician, although Henry was in high school. And that opened the door because when Henry volunteered for the Navy, they ask you, what kind of experiences have you had that may be useful? And he said, well, I'm practically an X-ray technician. In 4 months, I could take the state exam. So right away, they put him into medicine. And he served the war in Hawaii. He was very distressed because I went out for the Navy Air Corps and passed the exam. And so he was very upset when I went into the Navy Air Corps because he knew the casualty rate. So I scored the highest in our group. So I was able to pick the spot on the plane where I would be gunner. I picked the tail, which was also very dangerous because that's where attacks came from. But I was good. And the 50 caliber machine gun bullet had a longer range than the Japanese 30 caliber on their Zeros. So that meant that you had about 4 seconds, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, that you could hit him before he could reach you and have a good chance that he would not reach you. But you had to get him in 4 seconds. After that, it was, pretty much even Steven. East LA, I thought, would be the end of my college, that I would go 2 years, then leave, and with that Associate of Arts degree, be able to get a good job in an aviation, mechanics. And one of my English teachers, she said, Julian, why don't you go to Pomona College? She'd already spoken to Mr. Walters, one of my other professors, and they had agreed that both of them and 1 or 2 other professors would recommend me to transfer as a junior to Pomona. And so I transferred to Pomona as a junior. And that also shaped me, because then I was exposed to very bright students that were highly motivated. And I had to study harder, but I had a B+ average, not an A-, a B+ average. But 3 of my professors, all of them in history, said, Julian, you ought to consider going to graduate school. Hubert Herring, character, used to be a minister, and then he left that, taught history. Said, Julian, I'll write a good letter for you to Harvard. And Harvard was just a name. To my knowledge, I was the first Mexican-American at Harvard. And I say that because I looked around, and the student body is not that large that, after a while, you've seen everybody. I received the doctor's degree at Harvard in 1955. It was quite an experience and something that I've always been proud of. I was mowing the lawn in the backyard on a Saturday because I wanted to finish before the USC-UCLA game started at 12:30. And my wife called out, telephone! Yes? Is this Professor Nava? This is so-and-so and so-and-so, calling from the State Department. The what? The State Department. What do you want? And then he said, if this conversation proceeds, you must promise before to not talk to anyone about what we talk about. And your Navy serial number is 569-242256. This guy is somebody. And then I said, okay, I'm sorry. What can I do? And I'll talk to no one about what we talk about. And then he said, well, the bottom line is a committee has nominated you to President Carter as U.S. Ambassador to Mexico.